Hussein Jassim, the host from the Teacher Training Institute. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 6th Arab Gulf Forum under the title Hybrid Learning, which comes in accordance with rapid changes that sweeps the world and affects the educational process. We in the United Arab Emirates are blessed with wise leadership that has an incredible vision and prospect. So we are honored to welcome Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan from the Teacher Training Institute to give us a workshop under the title Students as Curators and Creators of Knowledge, Embedding the IB Learner Profile into Teaching and Learning Biology, Collaborative Learning in an Online Environment. Our guest is a holder of PhD of Biochemistry and Microbiology with more than 18 years of experience in the field of education and is currently working as the Director of Medical Education, College of Medicine and Health Science in Khalifa University of Abu Dhabi. We are hoping that you participate with your input and questions through the chat feature. We, with the help of our guests, will respond to all your questions. The attendance link will be placed before the end of the session via the chat feature. Before proceeding with the presentation, I will be gladly be announcing an ad of the founder of Ms. Hanadi, in case if you can display the ad. We are encouraging teachers As you can see from the ad, we're encouraging all teachers to still participate in the Founder Award. So going back to Dr. Siobhan. Dr. Siobhan, you may start with your presentation, please.
Okay, where's it gone? Can you see it?
Just give us some few seconds, it will come up. Have you shared the presentation?
Yeah, we have shared already. Do I need to
Okay.
share again?
No, it's okay. Just give it a few seconds. It will pop up. Okay, I
Should
think.
we do it again?
Yeah, let's do it again.
Okay.
Let's wake it up. Morning.
Wake it up.
Yeah. If you, yeah. Now, share it again. Okay, can you display it, Dr.
Yeah.
Siobhan?
Sure. Is that okay?
Perfect. So
Great.
I'm going to give you the lead to
Mhm.
lead the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Siobhan O'Sullivan. So I'm going to talk to you today on a topic that I've been very interested in and working with students over the last number of years. So the presentation is on students as curators and creators of knowledge and embedding the IB learner profile into teaching and learning biology and looking at the whole area of collaborative learning, which can happen both online and offline. Okay. So my own background is in, first of all, I'm Irish. I've been living in Abu Dhabi for the last 3.5 years. My background is in biochemistry and microbiology. And in the latter 10 years, I've been working in the area of curriculum development. So I followed on from working in bench science to actually doing a master's in teaching and learning. And I've been working in curriculum development for the last number of years. So I've been lecturing in biochemistry to medical students, biomedical students, science students. In terms of education, I was very involved in developing our programs in science education in Ireland, in particular in the area of biology. I also worked a lot with primary schools because at that time, you know, over 10 to 15 years ago, science wasn't really being developed at primary level. So I worked with them on continuing professional development, and from that I was involved in development of a master's program for primary science students. When I came to Abu Dhabi 3.5 years ago, I came here with my husband, who's also a scientist, and my children. So when I came first, I worked in research as a research scholar in Khalifa University, working in basically in education and in the whole area of project-based learning. Oops, I've gone back one here now. So at the moment, since April 2019, I was appointed as the Director of Medical Education in the preclinical years of the MD programme in Khalifa University, and this is the first MD programme in Abu Dhabi, and we're just taking in our second cohort of students as we speak. So why am I speaking at the Arab Forum? So, and where do I fit in all of this? So as a university faculty member, I was always very interested in the IB, in IB biology and in the IB in general, because the students that we have at university level who have done IB, they were always a different caliber to the other students. We would often define them as the students that really hit the ground running. So I had a huge interest just an interest in the IB curriculum as a whole. When I came to Abu Dhabi, when I was in between jobs, I worked as an IB biology teacher, and this was in an international school in Abu Dhabi. Again, it was something I was very, very interested in. I was always interested in the whole idea of the profile attributes, which they really it's really ingrained in the curriculum. So these are that students are inquirers, knowledgeable thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, risk takers, balanced and reflective. I also had an interest because my children, my twin girls who are 8, attend an IB school, and I was very fascinated by that they were very knowledgeable about these profile attributes, and much of the work that they did in school, they talked about the attributes a lot. My own interest really was around the whole area of international mindedness, especially working in an international school, its understanding and its implementation, and the fact that it can be very cross-curricular. So you can actually it just doesn't apply to biology. You can use it in all subjects across the board. So how can the learner profile be embedded into teaching and learning? One of the things that really struck me when I started to teach in the international school was that there's huge emphasis on the learner profile being visible in the classroom. And I saw it everywhere, and I often questioned about how is it actually being implemented. So what I was interested in is to move from the knowledge-based didactic teaching space to a more holistic approach, especially in relation to teaching biology. I was interested in the development of a learning community where students can work together collaboratively, and of course this can happen both online and offline. I've always been interested both at second level and at high school level and at university level in the whole idea of building relationships even with the students in the year ahead, and that there can be some kind of peer mentoring going on there. I was interested in the emphasis on learning beyond the classroom and formal education towards education as growth, discovery, engagement with the world, and mainly producing and promoting a collaborative environment. As you know, when students come into university, they are expected to, work in groups, do collaborative work, meet deadlines, and I was very conscious of that at high school level, that this would prepare them for that. So the emphasis really was on group work, collaboration, and developing communication skills. And as I mentioned earlier, the area that I was very, very interested in is international mindedness, because I feel when you work in a different country and you work in an international school, we have students coming from all over the world, and it's so easy for them to lose identity with their culture and where they come from. So this was an area I really wanted to bring into my teaching in teaching biology. So the critique of the IB curriculum, like every curriculum that we have, there are good things about it and there are bad things about it. So the critique of the IB curriculum is that it's very Western centric, and living in the Middle East, sometimes I felt that it really wasn't suitable in parts, or maybe it needed to be more flexible and more adaptable. And the issue with that is that we are not in a Western culture when we're living in the UAE and when we're in the Middle East. And the result is that students can lose their sense of identity and their cultural knowledge. And there's this whole idea that West is best, because many of the textbooks that we use in teaching IB are Western based, the literature is Western based. There's limited and no cross-religious understanding. Again, when you have a class in an international school, you will have a very mixed pot in there of all different cultures, different religions, etc. Many students will say or pretend that they are internationally minded. And so the question is, where do they actually get it from? Do they get it from school? And the reality is that many of them will get it from their parents. The cumulative advantages that they will get from being international with listening to their parents, understanding and seeing the experiences that their parents have, the diasporic network that they will have through their parents and the work of their parents. So what do we mean by international mindedness? So again, a lot of this is based on views of teachers, parents and students, and the whole idea of a Western cultural capital, global interconnections, a tool for global mobility. So that's what it's often referred to. Many of the students that we teach in IB, most of them plan to go to university in the West, and this probably is why it's so Western centric. However, the reality is that in the UAE, more and more nationals are choosing to attend international schools, and they aspire to study and work in the UAE. And the UAE government are investing so much in education because they want to keep their people in the country. They want to train their people and they want to keep them in the country. So therefore, working in schools, there's a great need for greater cross-cultural exchange and understanding. So the challenges of teaching in the Middle East. So cultural awareness is paramount. Teachers are encouraged not to bring up certain controversial topics, and this can be, in the case of biology, it can be stem cells, evolution, genetic engineering. The classroom is a melting pot of cultures. 80% expatriate in many cases. So the challenge of being a teacher working in the Middle East is that you need to really create a safe classroom environment. And this safe environment is where cultures are considered, respected, and students feel safe to express their opinions. So it's very important that as a teacher, one has to facilitate a lot, and it's important that you steer conversations in the right direction so that you're actually respectful of the cultures. So my experience from teaching in an IB class, so my students came from North America, Egypt, Sudan, Spanish. Many of them were Spanish, many from the UAE, of course, from Barcelona in Spain, Jordan, etc. So you can see on the map there. So they were a big mix of students. So what I wanted to achieve with the students was to explore cultures and understand biology-related topics, acceptance of difference, avoidance of cultural superiority. And again, that's a challenge that you have in a class where you have minorities, for example. An appreciation of cultural differences, willingness to describe one's culture, holistic development of the students at the cognitive and the affective level, and empowering students to be creative, to think and to reflect on their own values, academic maturity, respect for cultures, opinions and values of others, open-mindedness, that you would develop students so that they would consider and accommodate views and opinions and even challenge their own thinking, and to develop a creative approach to problem solving. Ultimately, what I really want to do in working with students at this level is to prepare them for lifelong learning. And that's important as they move forward, as they go ahead and they go to university. So in developing international mindedness, students become more culturally aware and culture sensitive. They act with care, consideration and compassion and understanding of backgrounds and their interactions with others. They learn from their interactions with others and through active listening and open-mindedness to become ready to consider and accommodate views that they might not have done before. So the challenges with adopting this approach is that it's perceived as outside the norm. The IB curriculum is very, very intensive and there is a huge amount of work to be done. So there's an excessive workload. It's very intense. So often taking on something like this can, you know, it would put a lot of people off because it's outside of the norm. And are you taking away from precious time in the classroom? You're looking at developing both knowledge skills and soft skills. The reality is that the workload for teachers has increased with responsibilities extended beyond classroom instruction. And as we are now working in the current situation with COVID, we know that classroom instruction has taken on another level, basically. The IB curriculum is content driven, it's higher level, it's very dense. And the danger with, you know, adopting or implementing anything new is that you're taking time from other topics. And of course, the question always is going to be, is this an efficient use of time and is it valuable? Is it good for the students' development? So the outcome that I wanted in relation to the biology curriculum is that I wanted to empower the students to think differently, to think and reason independently. Development of a holistically educated student with emphasis on relationships and learning, the learning that emerges from them, taking students beyond the confines of a knowledge-based education. There is a huge tendency, especially in the area of biology, that it's very much rote learning. And I really wanted the students to think outside the box. And lastly, the commitment to subject knowledge and the use of the knowledge in a broad range of contexts. And in this way, it becomes like an educational currency. So the intervention was, I was working in an IB biology international school in Abu Dhabi for 6 months, and the students I worked with were grade 11 and grade 12. The nationalities, as I mentioned already: Syria, Palestine, India, Canada, USA, Sudan, Spain, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and the UAE. Students worked in groups of 3 or 4, and what they did was they produced a biology newsletter, or a kind of a periodical that came out basically every week. And this periodical was presented both physically in the class, and they also did it online as well. So the content, excuse me. So the content was what's news in biology, because the danger with when you teach curriculum, the curriculum is often a bit out of date and it doesn't cover a lot of contemporary issues. So as you can imagine, if I was to do that today, we would probably have a huge emphasis on looking at COVID, looking at the treatments, etc., and the biology of the actual virus. Students had to do some research, and they present topics that they have an interest in, controversial or otherwise. They had to interview with a mentor. So I encouraged the year 11s to work with the year 12s and to find a mentor. And this pairing was based on interest. So there was many in year 11 who knew what they wanted to do when they finished, and there were similar interests in the year 12 group. So they kind of fostered a relationship, and there was mentoring going on. So the pairing was based on interests. Students had to devise a series of questions, they had to record an interview, and they had to present it. One of the areas bringing in the international mindedness was that, given that we had all these countries, that students really began to look at their own country, began to look at scientists in their own country, namely biologists, and to look at the actual research landscape in their country. Also, they had a curriculum piece review, reflection on difficulties, what helped them in understanding. Then they had to develop a quiz or crossword to test the understanding. And then these were presented weekly. And these, as I mentioned, these can be presented both in class or out of class. So they can present online as well, collaboratively. And then there was a question and answer session at the end. So after they presented, the other students in the class had an opportunity to ask questions. So these are some of the periodicals that were produced. So you can see there's a whole range of them here. They gave them their own names. They were really of very high quality, so much so that the school actually displayed a lot of them in the school, and there was a huge interest even by the other classes in the content. Some of the year 12s were actually using them as a study guide. Many of the topics, especially the quizzes and the crosswords, could be used by them. Okay, so these are just some examples. I love showing these off because I was so proud of them, and the students got so much, they felt so good from producing these and actually presenting them, and they had a real sense of achievement. And from our discussions afterwards, that it really helped them to identify with their own country. They never really thought much about the research landscape in their own country, the biologists in their own country, and they were very surprised by the extent of them, and they were really proud to actually present the content. So again, you can see here. And again, what you're seeing under all of these is that they are taking the actual learner profile attribute as their guide in producing the different sections in the newsletter. So you can see you have knowledgeable, you have inquirer, challenging the facts is a risk taker, and again you have what's hot in science. And again, these are risk takers talking about topics that are a bit controversial, but presenting them in a very safe and correct way. Again, so scientists from Korea, Egypt, and you can see that there are other ones there, American inquirers. Again, down at the bottom you can see that these are the knowledge pieces, and again focusing on the important topics that are important in the IB. So again, these are just more examples of the content that was produced. So the peer mentoring was a big part of this. Again, as I mentioned already, the students met with, or they hooked up with a student the year ahead. They all would know each other from being in the same school. Many of them wouldn't have been aware of where the grade 12 students had planned to go when they finished. So I was able to guide them a lot on that, because I would have taught, I was teaching grade 12, so I knew where a lot of them wanted to study and what their interests were. So in that way I was able to set up a lot of the peer mentoring between the two groups. The students really enjoyed the peer mentoring. They enjoyed doing the interviews, and many of these interviews were recorded, and again they were uploaded. So in terms of applying this in an online collaboration, many of the students would have produced a folder, and they would have stored all the documents in the folder. They would have stored all their video recordings, and then when they presented, these can be presented both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, as a matter of a student just opening up their folder and sharing the content, sharing the interviews, etc. Okay, so what this achieved. So it broadened the scope of biology in the curriculum. Students had the opportunity to research biology, and I think it's so important at this level, especially in, you know, as they're in high school in year 11 and 12, that they are introduced to research, and they begin to identify areas that they're interested in, and they have an opportunity to actually research them, to present them in class, and to actually debate issues. Students had the opportunity to see biology research taking place in their own countries, and to appreciate the research taking place in their own country. And many of them, as I said already, many of them were not aware of the research landscape in their own country. So this was a wonderful opportunity for them to see that. They had the opportunity to act independently, present topics they have an interest in. They developed their communication skills, both as they had to present in class, and they can present in an online environment. They built peer relationships both with their the other students in the class, because they worked in groups and they worked collaboratively, and they also had the opportunity to build peer relationships with the year ahead. And this also developed cultural awareness and understanding, and it made them more sensitive and more understanding of the different cultures in the class. Feedback from students, so the feedback were both questionnaire and qualitative based interviews, and these were carried out by colleagues of mine actually that I worked with in the school. They were uniformly positive. Students commented that they never thought about scientists from their own country, and they had no idea of the research in biology. They loved having the opportunity to research topics and present on things that interested them. Having the profile attributes made us think about what it means to be an IB student. So this was really important for me, that it was something that I really wanted them to think about the attributes and apply them in their learning. I learned about my classmates, what interests them, and I saw their passion. I loved being able to be creative in design, and having choice, deciding what to put in. It made biology so much more interesting and enjoyable. We saw the big picture outside of the course material. This was different. It gave us autonomy to choose and be independent thinkers. The grade 12s are so envious. They would have loved to do this. And I have learned so much about my classmates and their culture. So my own experience from this is that I had a greater understanding of international mindedness. Students were more aware of their country, where they came from, and their culture. Working relationship between the teacher and the student changed, and we became we worked very well together and collaboratively, and the classroom really was transformed. It was really a beautiful environment to work in, and the students just really enjoyed this. It was a really enjoyable experience for them, and it was really enjoyable for me to see them in action and to see a different side of them, to see their passion. It gave greater awareness of how different cultures treat topics differently, and again it built relationships between peers and with students in both grade 11 and grade 12. Acknowledgements. I could not have done any of this work without the wonderful students that I worked with in grade 11, and I'm very thankful for that. To the principal in GEMS American Academy, where I worked, for facilitating this, and our IB coordinator at the time, and of course my fellow IB teachers. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Siobhan. Now we announce that we take your questions. So let us see. Is there any question you can see, Supervisor, in the chat box? Because I see no comments.
I don't see anything.
Yeah, sometimes I get some networking issue. Okay.
Yes.
So there is no question.
No, ma'am.
Fine. Then we reached to the end of this session. We thank our distinguished guests for her participation, for sharing her valuable expertise. We hope that you, the audience, gain the knowledge and are potentially able to apply it into your educational field. Thank you so much, Dr. Siobhan, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your interactions, the audience. I'm sorry, but I can't see any comments. Sometimes we get an issue, we don't get any comment, but even if you have commented, inshallah, once we see it, we will address it to Dr. Siobhan, and hope that you stay with us, our beloved audience, to the next session that my colleague, Rashid, will take the lead.
There is actually one question
Rashid,
that just came in if you have time for it.
Yeah,
it's from a Susan
time,
Matthews.
actually, plenty of time.
Okay, no problem.
Yes,
it just
but
came
I don't
up just
see
now,
any
so here it is.
From
It
Susan,
just came
right?
published now. It's from, yes. It says, since we don't have so many opportunities to... Yeah, hi, Susan. Since we don't have so many opportunities for practicals as in IB, how can we improve this in our MOE schools, is the question.
So since you don't have opportunity to do practicals, is it?
Yes, ma'am. In IB schools, how can we improve this in MOE schools?
Well, even through COVID, even at university level, if you can imagine, we're teaching medical students, so you can imagine the challenges of teaching them in the current climate. There are so many opportunities to do virtual labs online. I've used them myself. and the students really enjoy them. Okay, it's not the same thing as doing a physical lab, but you do get the concept, and they are, you know, they're very high tech now. The virtual labs are very good in terms of even doing the experiments. You know, they almost have like little shelves, and you have to pull things off the shelf. You have to pull down all the ingredients that you need to carry out your experiment, and you can physically do experiment by pulling things into conical flasks, and you can see the actual results. You can see oxygen bubbles, or you know, that kind of thing. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, and it does, you know, they are very, very good, and they are, you know, they are better. They are getting better all of the time, but you know, it's not a substitute for the actual lab. I think from my own experience, because I've worked in so many places over the years, in places where I had wonderful facilities and places where I had nothing. And I've always tried to improvise by even doing demos in the classroom, you know, bringing in things in the classroom. I remember bringing in, you know, a graduated cylinder and bringing in hydrogen peroxide and collecting fresh liver from the butchers and chopping it up and putting it into the graduated cylinder, and the students see all the oxygen bubbles. There are lots of things you can do as demos in the class, you know, in front of the students. And you know, there are so many resources there now that, you know, it's a lot easier to do that now than before. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Siobhan. I think this is the only question that we saw at top. Through a positive comment, I can see people are appreciating the session. So thank you so much, Dr. Siobhan.
You're welcome.
Yes,
and please, by all means,
one more
and now we're moving.
If anybody wants to contact me,
please
feel free to pass on my email address. I would be delighted to help.
Okay, and Dr. O'Sullivan, there's one more comment. It's a follow-up from Susan Matthew. She says, could you suggest some virtual labs used specifically for biology? Because we see most are catered to chemistry and physics. So are there any virtual labs used specifically for biology?
I haven't looked for a while, but I can look them up. If you want to message me, I can share my email address with you and we can communicate offline. And I would be happy to help in any way I can and maybe direct you.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you see more questions, Supervisor?
No, Miss Amira, I do not see any more questions right now.
I think you are receiving them earlier than me. Sorry?
No, Miss Amira, I don't see any more questions right now.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Siobhan.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
So the next session will be in Arabic. Okay, so we're moving to the next session with Ms. Sumaya.